The first Berserker Khazan is a huge surprise. It has a lot of things going against it, like being GeneralApple Studios' first attempt at a Souls-like game and being published by Nexon, which isn't known for quality. Yet it still managed to become one of the better Souls-like games to surface in recent years, and I believe that with slight changes, it can become one of the best Souls-like games to exist. Hello everyone, I'm GeneralApple. I make deep dive videos about games I'm passionate about, and today we finally get to talk about the first Berserker Khazan since I finished the game about 2 weeks ago. I know I'm a bit late to the party because I had to take a 2-month break to play Expedition 33 and Lies of P Overture, but we're here now, and that's all that matters. Even though the game was released 4 months ago, I'm still gonna give you the obligatory spoiler warning, just in case you haven't played it yet. And if for some reason you don't want to play it for yourself, you can always watch the full playthroughs on my secondary channel. Now with the introduction out of the way, we can start by talking a bit about the background of this game, which I actually discovered recently after finishing it. Apparently, First Berserker Khazan is a spin-off set in the Dungeon Fighter Online universe, a game that is also developed by GeneralApple Studios. In both games, Khazan is an important character who was framed for treason by the Empire's Dark Priest Ozma and was set for execution. But the big difference between the two games is that in the original DFO universe, Khazan is executed, while in the first Berserker Khazan universe, he actually survives, making the story take a completely different turn and making this game a standalone experience. The developers wanted to make sure that people who haven't played DFO can still enjoy the story without any prior knowledge of this universe, and I think this was the best decision they could have made for the game, because up until 2 weeks ago, I didn't even know DFO existed, and I'm pretty sure most of you didn't either. So it's nice for once to see developers going outside their comfort zone to make other players' experience better. Now, the rest of the story is okay. It's not boring to the point where I had to skip all the dialogue, but it wasn't interesting enough to get me invested either. It was just kinda there to move the plot forward in a way that makes sense, but until the last portion of the game, nothing really interesting happens. So I'm only going to talk about key parts of the story to keep this video from running too long, but if you want a full breakdown, I highly recommend you watch this video made by Beyond Horror Gaming. The story begins with our main protagonist, Khazan, once a brave, beloved general, now being transported as a criminal through the snowy mountains towards his execution. In addition to being brutally tortured, his tendons were cut to make sure he could never raise a blade again, and he was humiliated throughout the entire ordeal. Khazan's cruel punishment is the result of betraying the Empire by staging a coup to overthrow the Emperor. But that's only what appears on the surface. In reality, Khazan's power and influence were feared by the nobles, and that made them see him as a threat. So with Ozma's cooperation, they decided to set him up by making false accusations and fabricating a story to make it seem like he was a traitor that needed to be dealt with. But as fate would have it, an avalanche struck while they were passing through the mountain, killing everyone except Khazan, who was left on the brink of death, only to be possessed by the spirit of the Blade Phantom, a being that wanted his strong body as a physical vessel. The Blade Phantom is actually not a singular entity, but a manifestation of pure bloodlust and vengeance, born from countless warriors who died violently with their weapons in hand. They wanted to claim Khazan's body and soul for their own use, but Khazan managed to defy them through his indomitable strength and burning rage, forcing them to instead forge a pact. In exchange for his soul, Khazan would gain the power to take revenge on those who betrayed him. This Faustian bargain marked the turning point from Khazan's identity as a noble general to the one who walks the path of the Berserker, shedding all humanity in the process. Believe it or not, all of this happens within just the first 2 hours of playing. I was really excited as the story seemed promising at first, but as I progressed through the game, the interesting parts have started to have some serious gaps between them, which I'll explain why later. After fighting the Blade Phantom, we arrive at the Crevice, a dimension between the Netherworld and the Mortal Realm that serves as our hub. Its design is pretty comfortable, but it's not as good or memorable as Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls or Hotel Krat from Lies of P. It's just kinda there for the sake of functionality, but it severely lacks a soul. I believe that was the developer's first big mistake, because a hub should feel like home. Souls-like games are difficult by nature, and having a place where you can calm yourself and let go of all the built-up emotions is especially important in this kind of game. Constructing a good hub can make or break a game, and you can see a clear example of that by how excited people were to return to Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 3 after the original game. Now, returning to the story, once we arrive at the crevice, we're set on a journey to destroy all who wronged us while uncovering the truth along the way. During our travels, we meet a lot of interesting characters with different ties to the story, some of whom also serve a more functional roles, like Defrone, a scholar of netherworld energies in service of Charon, the current ruler of the netherworld. She helps guide us through parts of the game and also unlocks Khazan power through the spirits bound to his weapons. But my personal favorite character is definitely the Bard. He's a wandering merchant that you encounter across 5 different locations in the game, and in each one, he sings about the tales of Digor, stories that parallel what Khazan is currently experiencing. And after you've heard all of his tales, he finally reveals his name, Digor. It's a subtle twist, showing that he's been through the same things that you have, and in a way, he's showing you his gratitude by revealing his true name to you. I love it when small stories are woven into a game, not to advance the main plotline, but to give life and meaning to the characters instead. The entire Dark Souls series is filled with this kind of interactions, and I believe that's why so many people praise its story. It makes everything feel more relatable, like we're not suffering alone, and that we're all just humans trying to understand something much grander than ourselves. Digor did just that, and I really hope the developers do more things like this in the future, because these kinds of interactions are a big part of what makes a good story. Further into the story, we'll learn a lot more about the Empire and meet many interesting characters. Some of whom we thought were enemies actually turn out to be our greatest allies. Later on, we find more evidence that proves we were not only betrayed by the Empire, but also by our closest friend, Ozma. After the nobles murdered Reese, Ozma's wife, his hatred for humanity grew to the point where he turned to chaos magic, an unstable force that feeds on negative emotions. Losing himself in the process, he became the embodiment of chaos, and as such, he saw Khazan's loyalty to the Empire as both naive and dangerous. That led him to orchestrate a plan that would bring down both the Empire and Khazan, for the sake of creating a better world, one free of corruption. Ironically, the chaotic power of Ozma ended up corrupting everything, turning the entire empire into an unstable mess. Only by uncovering all of Ozma's secrets, we managed to unlock the game's true ending. After we defeat Ozma in the audience chamber, he unleashes a final explosion, destroying the palace in the process. We're then transported to Ozma's quarters, where we learn more about his motives, but more importantly, about the influence of the Eye, the true mastermind behind everything that happened. With Khazan's lust for revenge still not satisfied, it seems like the game is setting up for a sequel, and I couldn't be happier. I think Khazan is a beautifully tragic character that I'd love to see more of in the future. And while the story turned out to be pretty good toward the end, like I mentioned earlier, the gaps between the interesting parts were just too far apart. The main reasons for that is that every time you start a new main area, you're given 2 or 3 side missions to go along with it. Normally, that wouldn't bother me if done correctly. But in this game, the side missions take place in the exact same locations you just explored during the main mission. So it makes absolutely no sense to return to the same area you were in just a few minutes ago, only now it has slightly different enemies and a mini-boss at the end which you've already fought like 5 times before. It made the game longer than it should have been for no good reason, and as a completionist, I found it frustrating. A better solution would have been to just merge the side missions with the main mission, turning it all into one larger area where you can explore and complete different objectives. Other Souls-like games have done this before, and honestly, I don't see any reason to change that. But that's pretty much all I had to say about the story, so let's move on to what makes this game truly unique: the gameplay. Now, I want you to believe me that I'm not saying this lightly, but First Berserker Khazan has one of the best combat systems I've ever seen in a Souls-like game. Instead of going for the usual slow-paced or hyper-speed combat we're all familiar with by now, they went for a more brutal hack-and-slash, heavy cinematic style, like what you see in God of War or Devil May Cry. Experiencing this kind of combat system in a Souls-like game was a first for me, and I gotta say, it was brilliant. Not only did we get a system that supports completely different playstyles, but we also got some pretty nice bosses to challenge ourselves with. It's like having the best of both worlds, and I'm still amazed the developers pulled off this combination without making it feel out of place. Now when it comes to the gameplay, there are so many elements to talk about, so I'll try my best to keep it organized. We should probably start by talking about the weapons. There are 3 different types of weapons in this game: dual wield, greatsword, and my personal favorite, the spear. Dual wield weapons are fast and agile, a perfect fit for players who likes to dodge constantly and apply aggressive pressure. Greatswords are for your classic Dark Souls fans, the kind of who likes to stay put and decimate their opponents in a single blow. The spear is best suited for players who likes to control the space and play defensively by keeping a safe distance and re-engaging at will. Not only do these weapons play in completely different ways from one another, but each one also has its own unique skill tree that allows for multiple builds using the same weapon. So for example, if I choose to play with a spear, I can have a build that relies entirely on dodging and hitting the enemy weak points, while someone else using the same weapon might go for a build focused on chain attacks to break enemy guard. 2 completely different playstyles using the same weapon. This is incredible. I don't think we've ever seen this much weapon variety in a Souls-like game before. And yes, I know other games technically have more weapons, but I'm talking about the fighting styles tied to them, not just the weapons themselves. Next, we have the basics: guard, dodge, and brutal attack, which is basically the same as Death Blow from Sekiro. We also have some additional mechanics in the common skill tree that are tied to Khazan himself, making them available no matter which weapon you're using. First, we've got Reflection, which is just a parry. When successful, it deals significant stamina damage and leaves the enemy vulnerable for a short period, but you can't use it to counter burst attacks, which are indicated by a special symbol. Similar to Reflection, we've got Counterattack. It works on the same principle as parry, but it can only be used against burst attacks. In my build, I didn't invest a single point into Reflection because I found guarding to be way more fun. But I did invest all of my points into Counterattack because every boss in this game has a burst attack, and it was just too satisfying to counter them. We should also mention the Javelin, which is the only consistent range option you have in this game, so you better use it. And lastly, we've got Phantom Form, which you unlock later in the game. This is your standard build-up transformation. You don't have to invest points into it if you're fine with the basic version, but it's pretty powerful and fun, so why the hell not? Now, admittedly, all of these systems can sometimes feel overwhelming, but the developers made absolutely sure not to throw everything at you all at once. Every new ability or function is recorded in the encyclopedia, which is easily accessible through the menu, so it's always worth checking if you feel like you've forgotten something. That makes trying out new builds all the more fluid and exciting. Definitely a great addition by the developers. We should also talk about the incredible crafting system in this game. Honestly, it's the best one I've seen in any Souls-like. It all revolves around just 2 NPCs. First, the Armorsmith, who helps you craft gear or consumables using the right materials and scrolls. And second, the Alchemist, who lets you augment item stats and level up your gear. You'll find scrolls containing gear sets by exploring different locations or completing specific achievements. Once you've got a scroll, just head to the Armorsmith with the right materials and you can easily craft it. Some rare pieces only drop from certain bosses, but you can farm them by revisiting the boss room and using a spirit of advocacy to make things faster. Choosing which set to craft is actually one of the easiest parts of the game. Everything is organized into clear sections by weapon types, so it's really simple to pick what fits your playstyle. The set bonuses are no joke either. They can drastically change how you play, with some even unlocking entirely new abilities. The sheer number of them really shows how much the developers wanted players to have freedom and variety in how they approach the game, and I'm glad they did. Another mechanic you can use to strengthen yourself is the collectible, soulstone, and jarling system. It's as simple as it gets. Just collect all of them in the zone you're currently in and cash them in for some sick rewards. Nothing much to add there, but it's definitely worth a mention. In a sharp turn, I'd like to say that the visuals in this game are absolutely impeccable. I'm genuinely glad the designers went with a unique art style instead of the photorealistic look that most Unreal Engine 5 developers are going for these days. It makes the game feel more memorable, and I feel like we've lost that lately due to the absurd number of developers using Unreal Engine 5. Most areas look incredible, but toward the end of the game, they become some of the best looking locations I've ever seen in a video game, period. They're rich with atmosphere and detail to an unbelievable extent, and I was genuinely stunned by how some of them looked. The designers really nailed each zone.
Not gonna lie, boys, this area wanna make me quit the game.
Whether it was a snowy terrain, a secret lab, or a swamp. And that's no easy feat. The animations in this game are outstanding. They're clear-cut and visually striking. I mean, you can literally see the blood and bruises on the enemies you're attacking, and I have to respect that level of attention to detail. The cinematics were also great. They went with motion comic style most of the time, and while that may have been a cost-cutting decision, I still think the final result turned out to be pretty good. In terms of music though, I'm not gonna lie, aside from the absolute banger on the title screen, I can't really remember anything else that stood out, which is unfortunate. Music is especially important in games like this because of the emotional impact it can have on the player. I mean, people literally cried when Gwyn's theme played again during the Soul of Cinder fight in Dark Souls 3. That alone speaks volumes about the power of a good soundtrack, and I really hope GeneralApple steps it up in the sequel. But on the other hand, the sound design is phenomenal. Every swing, clash, and footstep can be felt by the player. There's nothing much I can say about it, as it's one of those things you just have to experience for yourself, but it definitely made my time with the game 10 times better. The voice acting, on the other hand, deserves a lot more praise. I think people in the Souls-like community have gotten so used to minimal voice work in our games that we don't give it enough credit. We definitely appreciate it, but we don't place it high on the list like we would in other genres, and that shouldn't be the case. First Berserker Khazan has some of the best voice acting I've heard in a while, and that's saying a lot considering that I just finished Clair Obscure Expedition 33 before playing it. Funny enough, Ben Starr, who voices my favorite character Verso in Expedition 33, also voices Khazan. So it's no wonder it felt so good to hear him work his magic again in this game as well. Now it seems that we are near the end of the video, so I think it's finally time we talk about the enemies and bosses in this game. The normal enemies are actually very well designed. Each mob has a unique pattern that you need to learn if you want to beat them easily. Most enemies aren't too difficult, but some are omega annoying. And you know I'm talking about that flying bat creature that take forever to kill because he never comes close. Or the undead enemies that you have to hit again while they're on the ground to make sure they stay dead. But to be fair, you can buy an item that helps you with that, but I would never give up on my treasure lantern. As for the mini-bosses, they're pretty good. But unfortunately, they get reused way too much in this game, and you kind of end up getting annoyed after fighting the same one for the 10th time. Now for the main bosses, I think I have a pretty interesting take. Let me explain. In a general sense, I think that most bosses in this game are nothing to write home about. I played on the highest difficulty and still managed to beat every boss in about 4 tries. The only exception was the final boss, but I'll expand on that in my upcoming boss ranking video, so stay tuned for that. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think bosses need to be super difficult to be fun, but for some reason, most bosses here can be staggered, and some are staggered so easily that you can just stun lock them into a corner without even trying. I get that this was GeneralApple's first attempt at a Souls-like game, but I think there's a certain level of difficulty people expect from this type of game. Or maybe that's just me. But here's the interesting part. I think GeneralApple managed to do what no other studio has before. Make magic-type bosses actually good. And I'm not talking about Renala, Queen of the Full Moon good. I mean a completely different level of awesomeness never seen in a Souls-like game before type of good. You can really feel like you're fighting an actual mage, not just a sword-wielding boss who occasionally throws out a lightning bolt at you, but a full-on magician who casts spells you have to dodge and actively tries to keep their distance from you to do so. Bosses like Beleriand genuinely made me wonder why other studios haven't done this before. I used to think it was technically too difficult to pull off, but clearly, that's not the case anymore. With that being said, I still think most of the bosses aren't that great, and that really brings the replay value down. I've played Sekiro and Dark Souls Remastered twice, but I honestly don't see myself replaying the first Berserker Khazan because of the boss quality. But that doesn't mean I'm not hopeful. On the contrary, I think GeneralApple Studios has a bright future ahead of them. They've already proven they're capable of innovating and bringing something new to the table, so I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for the sequel and wishing them all the best, not just because I want them to succeed, but because they've earned it. Overall, if I had to rate this game, I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10. There's still a lot of room for improvement, but I can't ignore the insane amount of fun I had playing it, which is exactly why I'd recommend it to any Souls-like fan out there. And that's pretty much all I had to say about the first Berserker Khazan. Whether you agree, disagree, or just feel like I missed something, make sure to let me know in the comments below. I tried to talk about everything in this video, but I'm not perfect and sometimes things just slip. Regardless, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content in the future. I'm planning to cover more indie games like this one, and I think you guys will enjoy that. But that's all for now, so once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.